Shop. Less. Shop. Less. Shop.
Welcome to Shopless, where we meet retail and commerce media leaders and hear their stories on how they became the titans of industry that they are today. As we all know, it's not like you can go to college for retail media. Heck, I didn't even go do marketing. So we're here to explore those paths and unpack some fun. Possibly a few side quests while we're at it. Thank you for tuning in, and on behalf of myself, Elizabeth, and Nick, welcome.
Shop. Less. Shop. Less. Shop. Less.
Okay, retail media leaders, a quick reality check. You're being asked to deliver incrementality, closed-loop measurement, and AI-ready data on top of infrastructure built on client-side tags and stitched IDs. Whew. That's the gap. MetaRouter fixes the first mile of your data, moving collection server-side so you get deterministic, privacy-compliant data flowing directly into your clean rooms, CDPs, and activation platforms. The result? Faster sites, materially better match rates, and data you can actually trust across Amazon, Walmart, Google, wherever you're activating. If retail media is becoming a data business, and it is, MetaRouter is the layer that makes the rest of your stack actually work. MetaRouter. Fix the foundation, unlock the upside.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Shopless podcast with myself, Elizabeth Marston, and my co-host, Nick Weinheimer. Nick, how are you doing today?
Hello, doing great. Glad to chat with everyone today. Happy Friday, Elizabeth.
Happy Friday, Nick. Do you have a guest for me today?
Always. It wouldn't be Shopless without a wonderful guest.
It would be a weird podcast, wouldn't it be?
It would be. It would be a little dry, though. I'm sure we would riff for 40 minutes and make it exciting. But today, I'm pretty excited. We're joined by someone who's done pretty much everything in modern marketing and has time now still to write some of the industry's sharpest commerce retail media hot takes. He is a longtime marketer. He's a retail media expert, a columnist, a keynote speaker, a consultant, an all-around kind of professional truth teller for brands and retailers and platforms trying to figure out what the hell is actually happening in e-commerce and commerce media. He's advised global brands and retail media networks, and he's built thought leadership that actually influences decision makers. He's authored some of the most widely cited perspectives on the future of retail media, from measurement and planning to creativity to the real-world mechanics of how these suckers are growing, how they should grow. And, if there's a smart, nuanced take on marketplaces, retail media, or the intersection of commerce and advertising, odds are already written it. So and he's probably challenged some of the industry's assumptions along the way. So you can think of him as kind of part strategist, part journalist, part coach, part friendly industry provocateur. He's the kind of guest who kind of makes you rethink what you knew while still keeping it practical and grounded and often comedic and refreshingly honest. So any guesses at this point who this might be?
Well, I have two follow-up questions. One, is he actually in a band? Because that would be awesome. Are there retail media bands?
Well, we're going to need to figure that out. That might be question one. And it might be like, when someone's tasting wine, you have to guess, is this an old world wine? Is this a new world wine? So
does he have a delightful accent?
He does. Well, I think so. I don't know. Others may different opinions.
Could it be our favorite newly minted judge or leader of, there's a certain retail media awards, I think, that just came out, but Mr. Colin Lewis?
Absolutely is. Wow. A guess on the first try. Excellent work. Let's welcome
it was the accent.
Colin.
Let's face it. That's the question that did it.
Exactly. Colin, welcome.
Hello, Elizabeth, and hello, Nick. Nick, just a tad disappointed you didn't also go and say tall, dark, and good-looking as well. That's my ego has been crushed before we even start.
This is an audio only, so I didn't want to leave our audience, completely, upset.
I've got to find out
the visuals of that.
Possibly a few untruths in that statement.
We're going to look at the Google Trends when this podcast goes live and see the Colin Lewis searches pop. Actually, we probably need to measure how much that's happening on ChatGPT now, too, given some of these trends. But thank you for joining us. It's excited.
Regardless, you talked about the band when I was teenager, I used to play in really appalling garage bands. And so I do not wish to inflict my lack of musical talent on the world. No matter how many drinks I'm not going to refresh that particular period of my life.
That is disappointing to hear. Like no amount of drinks. Are you sure?
The thing is, Nick, as I know, is an incredible musician, and so it's kind of like me talking to Nick is like, you know, looking at a Ferrari, and me, you know, sort of playing chopstick with 2 fingers. So yeah, it's I in my dreams I kind of do it, like lie awake at night going, yeah, you know, if only I just had talent, practice, and everything else could all just fall into place.
And I'm assuming that
play chopsticks.
I'm assuming that this band and these teenage years were, I mean, Ireland, right? Is that where you grew up?
Oh yeah. I was like, I grew up in the northern inner city part of Dublin, and there was not a lot to do when I grew up. So lots of people played in really bad bands in garages, and we froze our asses off, and then got a few gigs and played some, you know, something like the Seattle scene, except, you know, in the 80s when I was a teenager. Well, listen, delighted to be here, and delighted to be one of your guests. So where do you want to start?
Really, we want to know where you started. So, I mean, high school, obviously. One of the things that we like to ask on this podcast in particular is like, what was your first retail experience? Like, how did you even begin to get into retail or think about it? We talked to one guest, and he was like, I used to push carts, you know, push shopping carts in a retail parking lot. There's somebody who started at like a exchange, like a, what do you call it? Commission based, consignment shop. Like, where did you find and fall in love with retail?
Well, that's a great question. I did my went to school here and did my undergraduate degree here, and pretty much my very first job, I was like a little, 21-year-old marketing assistant, and a couple of months into the job, a clueless marketing assistant, I'd like to point out, and my boss walked into me one day and said, "Hey, Colin, we've just bought this company. We don't really know what we bought, and here's the keys to the van, and we want you to drive around Ireland and work out what the hell's going on with these customers." And I was given a keys to a blue Mitsubishi van and an Excel sheet, as in like a piece of paper with like a list of clients on it, and I was told to hit the road, bud. And that was the amount of training I got as well, by the way, because I literally hadn't got a clue. And that was my first real foray into the sort of like the pointy end of retail. And in fact, the company was that they had acquired, and I was doing the deliveries for, and merchandising and everything, and sales for. I was making jams and marmalades, and it was actually a thing I used for years and years after that. In fact, I still use it when people talk to me about shopper marketing. A little voice in my head says, "Oh, that's the time when I walked into the shop and I would go, hey, I'm from, Alexander's the company name." And we would go and I go, "Hey," and they go, "Who the hell are you, buddy?" And I go, "Funny, I can't find our products here." And they're like, "Again, who the hell are you?" "What? Well, you're on a list." And they were just like, "Get out," or at least I'll have to learn some art of persuasion. And that's where I learned how to merchandise, price, shop marketing, you name it. So yeah, that was my first one, and I've never forgotten the lessons of that.
How much marmalade?
I was not gonna. Yeah, I was gonna say that was not on my bucket list of things you'll say today.
Yeah, no, and the thing is, like, the maddest bit of the lot is that there's still elements of all that that's true, which was that because I remember one particular trip I came back, and we ended up like working with Marks and Spencers and retailers across Europe, but this was like day one or week one or whatever, and they weren't too far off, like literally, pots of jam stirring around in the back of the building. Then it moved to a proper factory and what have you, and I can remember coming back to my boss, who became quite a famous person in Ireland, and she'd say, "Colin, like, why is the sales down? Like, what's going on?" And blah blah blah. Is it the taste? Is it the label? I mean, maybe we need to change the brand, and we need a full tasting. That's what's going on. I'm like, Gina, no, we can't. You can't find it. I can't find the product in the store, so the customers have no chance. And they're like, no, it's definitely tasting. We need to do a tasting. And we go and do a tasting. And I'm like, Gina, they can't find the product in the store. So every time I remember that. I remember this every time people talk about out of stocks, and people talk about all the merchandise we're going to do in the store, and I just say, listen, and it's the most basics side. Can you find the bloody product in the store? And then I, think of my little jams and marmalade days.
But
What's your favorite
we're going to
marmalade?
ask you.
Yeah.
We're going to ask you a little later. We often do about like the advice you have for younger folks. But
Yeah.
what strikes me about that story that seems to be a truism or an adage in any business really is just how important the junior people are who are closest to the actual business, who are closest to the customer or closest to whatever the work is, where your executive is going, what's happening? Like, how do I get the insight to actually make the strategic decisions? And it's interesting how that pops up.
There's a thing which I would say, I know we're going to talk about the young person's thing later, but I can remember distinctly thinking at the time, maybe they know more than me. Yeah, because I was like little old me, 21, and I didn't have a lot of confidence, obviously. And I was like, maybe it's me. Maybe it is the taste. Maybe it is the label. And then I'd be like, no. Hold on a second. Like, I can't find the product. And so it was this little bit of like self-belief as well, and also how people can delude themselves. We can all delude ourselves, me, myself included, obviously, because I'm not quite tall, dark, and handsome. But you know what I mean. So it's one of the things I talk to people about is, don't believe don't believe yourself.
I will still have to come back to it. Are you a jam man or a marmalade man?
Jam, and my wife just laughs at me all the time because I'm addicted to raspberry jam, and like I literally love it. And hard as may seem to believe, we actually make our own blackcurrant jam as well.
Wow.
You guys ever had Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say that stuck with you for life. Like.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's like obviously, it's like a little kind of meme I can't shake in my head kind of thing. It gave me my first job, so therefore I have to be loyal to it forever.
That's interesting. Have you guys ever had apple butter?
Oh, I have
like
butter and I have apples. Never the twain shall meet.
It's called apple butter, but it's really like an apple jam kind of thing. And
they cook it differently. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like an American thing. And I was in a play when I was in 6th grade. I was Tom Sawyer in a play, and for all of the rehearsals at the opening of the show, it's like you see like he's stolen the jam from Aunt Polly, and I ate an entire jar of apple butter during the run of that show, and I can't even smell the stuff. Yeah, it's like.
Well, there are these kind of little faux pas you can fall into. So in the US, they call cider, and I'm like, cider? Okay, great. Now, cider in this side of the world is alcoholic. Right. But cider in the US is not alcoholic. So you can get a little bit disappointed if you're like, wow, it's a pretty good price for a cider. Oh, that's why it's a soft drink.
That I will say that is changing a little bit. There is some influence we have our hard cider scene really ramping up. A lot of craft hard cider places now. So, got to get you out to Seattle, where Elizabeth and I live. We'll take you around.
Sounds good.
Okay, so eventually the jam adventure ends. How does jam adventure end, and like what happens after that?
I decided to. Hard as may seem to believe, I had a green card for the US, and I had a permanent residency visa for Australia, and I didn't know anybody in the US. I'm the only Irish person in the world with no relatives in the US because I think our family was too poor to immigrate, and so I moved to Australia and slept on the floor for about 6 months. Started with a company called Thomas Cook, and I was their product manager for retail. Then I became their head of marketing at age 27 for a continent, and rose from that to working for the global chief exec by the age of 30. Dang.
So why Australia? Like, I mean, you don't happen upon visas and whatnot. Like, there's something that drove you to make that decision. Why did you leave Ireland?
Because I am a big fan. When people say they're a big fan of travel, I think mostly what they mean is they like going to Florida or going to Spain kind of thing. But in my case, I've been to about 70 countries. So when I say I like travel, like I really like it, as in the idea of heaven for me is to be landed in a country and, just no resources, no nothing, just, whatever you need and working from there. So I love all that stuff. This year, we're trying to see, can we get a trip to Uzbekistan? Most people are like thinking about sitting on the beach in Greece for 2 weeks, but we're like disappointed we can't get to Uzbekistan.
Dang. It's a
Yeah.
it's a
Quite the bug. So that drove you to say, look, I want to be on the other side of the world. Maybe some
Also,
warmer weather than the North Sea
yeah.
winds coming in.
My oldest friend in the world, who I know since I was 10, had moved there, and he was like, mate, you'll love it, you know. So, and he's still there, whatever it is, 20, 30 years later. And that was why I did it. And at the time, it was the land of opportunity, just like the US. And that's what I say. And then I ended up moving back to Europe because they asked me to work for the global CEO out of London. So, yeah, and I did a bit. The other thing I did was that, again, not as I say, not a lot of people know this. They asked me to do a bit of sort of chasing down opportunities in Southeast Asia. So I spent a lot of time in Japan, Indonesia, Singapore, Hong Kong, and even like Thailand and Malaysia. And which was like, at the time I was, you know, clearly I wanted to go meet that person and smack him around the head because I was a bit of an idiot, because I was like, I'm not so sure I want to do this. But essentially it meant I flew around Southeast Asia, business or first class, and stayed in 5-star hotels, had nice conversations with people, and then went home. And I wasn't, at the time I was like, is this really a job? Now I look back and go, oh my God, what an idiot I was. But that's what I did for a couple of years as well. Then I moved back to Europe.
So, do you speak any other languages?
No, only a little bit of French, German, and Spanish.
So how did that go in Southeast Asia? Like, there's primary.
Everybody speaks English. Yeah. You need, like, if you're, well, in my case, I spent 3 months in Indonesia, so you have to pick up a bit of Bahasa to get around. But that's one of the easiest languages in the world to pick it up, at least at that entry level.
Wow.
I actually did go to Latin America on the way back to Europe. I landed in La Paz in Bolivia without one word of Spanish, not even a word. And nobody speaks Spanish in Bolivia or Peru. And yeah, I winged it.
Very cool.
So so through this process, right, you're into your later 20s, kind of couple questions. One, you know, you work your way into working for the global CEO. What, I mean, obviously you were very, you were really good at navigating opportunities to create value in the organization, and obviously, got the access to the CEO. What did you think, getting into that, and what was kind of the biggest, thing you weren't expecting, or maybe aha moment in kind of having access and working with the CEO that you took into your next gigs?
Well, I think one point on that is that two elements. I got a lot of promotions pretty fast, and what surprised me about the promotions was that if you did one or two things well and people recognized that they were done well, and typically in my case it would have been adding revenue to the bottom line. I did one campaign that tripled the revenue for the company in a month, and all you need to do is one thing, people notice, and on the back of that you get promotion. You can pretty much live off that for a year or two as well. So again, one top tip I would say to people: look out for the opportunity that you can actually really add, and I mean revenue, to the bottom line, and ideally as substantial as possible. That's the quickest way to get a promotion. There's a few other kind of subtle things in the background which we'll talk about later, but you got to deliver pretty fast. I delivered pretty fast, which now looking back, it is the right thing to do. I can get out there and do something pretty fast, but also believe in yourself. Now, when I say believe in yourself, I mean, once you've done your homework and you think this is going to work, put it all on the line, rather than, then that's what happened. I said, like, we're going to do this campaign. This thing's going to work. I totally believe in it. And I persuaded everybody. We tripled the revenue, and we did this on a regular basis, get a promotion, end up with the global CEO a few years later.
So they really liked your CEO obviously loved the work you were doing. Tripling the revenue is going to get noticed. And does that make you kind of become, or some of the early days of becoming the kind of the consultant mind that you are today, and that the CEO is sort of bringing you in to be his, augmented brain?
Yeah, I was, but I was very naive, Nick.
Sure.
I wouldn't say I was as good as I could have been at that time. I had one experience, which was that we had Accenture in for a couple of months, I should say, and that was very interesting learning from those, because that's when you meet some really smart people who are very articulate and can present well and whatever. So I always remember that as well. No, one thing I would say, kind of second takeaway aside from the thing, I was willing to work very hard. Like that was the key. Like I worked the whole time and didn't care what it took. Yeah. The work ethic I'd inherited from my father, kind of thing. So it was like, get into it and work very hard. But the move to a different level, which kind of happens roughly late 20s to early 30s, it's a slightly different level. And in fact, it's something a lot of people ask me for career advice now, and I'm quite specific on this topic, which is there's a shift that occurs between 29 and sort of 32, 33. But at the time, you sort of don't realize this shift is happening. And it's this, which is you can live off the fact that you're young till you're about 28, 29. Then you're the same as everybody else. And then you got to enter into a different realm, if you will. And that's where you've got to think a little bit more, if you will, politically, like lowercase p, politically, as in understand the dynamics of the organization. It's not necessarily 100% about doing the right thing. It's about being seen to do the right thing as well as doing the right thing and being politically savvy. And I wouldn't say I was that particularly savvy, politically savvy till I got into my mid-30s, where I kind of learned it a different way.
In the race for retail media dominance, most brands are already behind. They're battling bloated tags, 30% data loss from ad blockers, and 50 millisecond windows to reach a shopper before they're gone. Enter MetaRouter. Led by the architect of Walmart's original ad business, MetaRouter is the first-mile infrastructure that replaces messy tracking pixels with a single, private, server-side stream. It's not just about routing data. It's about sub-second identity resolution that turns anonymous browsers into known buyers, all while keeping your first-party data locked inside your own cloud. Stop playing catch-up with yesterday's data. Own the first mile with MetaRouter.
Shop.
Well, and understanding early on that you get the ability to affect revenue and drive it, top line, bottom line, that getting close to that is not something that people generally in their 20s necessarily, they're looking for that job to slot in. Okay, I do this job. They're not necessarily thinking or understanding the whole picture of how do I get closer to or affect the actual revenue and success of the company. And then I think maybe that is some of what's required in that maturing period of 29 to 32 is like realizing, okay, how am I, if I really want to make a stepwise move, how am I actually going to, move the needle?
The good point there, Nick, because there's a couple of views on that, and I'm sort of, depending on when you catch me, but in theory, in practice, I say, attach yourself to the revenue as close as possible. Yeah, if you believe you can impact the revenue, attach yourself to the revenue of the business as close as possible. And I'm not saying you, necessarily become the head of sales or whatever the case is, but like where you're associated with the revenue driving aspects of the business, those levers or levers, as you would say in the US. Now, of course, the other side of that particular coin is that, of course, if you don't deliver, right at the door, and so that's why it's a two-edged sword. Because the worst part, I believe, is to not be associated with the revenue, and then you're, what are you doing, kind of thing. What are you doing in the business? You're just another add-on, as far as I'm concerned. You always have to be kind of closer to the fire, is my worldview.
So we are a commerce media podcast, and I like to say commerce media because as I look through your career history, you've taken some high-flying marketing roles, let's call them, throughout the middle part of your career. But maybe take us beyond, this role through some of your next few as you enter into your 30s. And
I actually, when I moved back to Europe, I worked in a bunch of startups. And that was like the ultimate in culture change, because you working in a large company with 20,000 people that was around 160 years to working in a company that's 5 years old with 100 people was a shock to the system, to say the least. And we only did business in the US, so that was also a bit of a change as well, whereas I hadn't done that much in the US before. Can I say I enjoy that? No. Did I enjoy any aspects of it? Not that many, but it was probably the kind of stick I needed to beat myself with, because the other trajectory of, very collegial and stuff like that, which was the way the companies that I'd worked for before was probably not ideal. And actually, as a result of that, then what I did was I did an MBA, and I combined my two previous loves, which is an understanding of technology, working through startups and e-commerce, and working in travel, to join an airline. So I started working with an airline, and in 2006 we were doing 100 million online, and we did that sort of role for 5 years or so, then worked in telcos where we're doing large scale TV campaigns right across Europe, like spending $25 million a year on TV. So that's kind of like where, if I look back from where I am today, it's like a deep understanding of the kind of real big above the line campaigns and how they're all put together with briefing, all that sort of stuff, and the risks you're taking with that. At the same time, that as well, like running an e-commerce website with 100 million use, you learn a load of things that a lot of people still don't know today. The power of email, how the layout of your PDP, your individual page, is much more important, still is much more important than you realize, and how small little things can drive revenue almost immediately. It's like, yeah, it's, as an aside, the reason I speak like this is that I then created a course for the local marketing institute there. They asked me to help create a course on digital marketing. So I created the full syllabus, and I taught the e-commerce bit and the digital marketing bit and the strategic marketing bit. And I can remember for 10 years of teaching that, I'd walk into the room going, I'm just talking about e-commerce here, blah, blah, blah. And people still didn't know stuff in 2016 that I knew in 2006. And every now and then I get asked to do some things like that, and I realize the stuff here in 2026 that I knew in 2006 that people still don't know about digital commerce and you know how e-commerce works.
What country are you in at this point?
Currently in Ireland. I'm in Dublin, partly because we have an apartment in London, and my wife works physically in Soho, so we flip between the two.
When you do, when you did the digital course. Where are you at? You're back.
That was in Ireland. Yeah, that was in Ireland. Although I never did any work, like my jobs were never actually in Ireland. I just happened to be based here, but the course happened to be based here. But all my work has always been around Europe and the UK. I don't think I've ever had a job ever since my jams and marmalades days, where I actually had to drive around the country and meet people.
So you take these. Kind of post MBA, you are scaling up, really staying close with e-commerce, but in the kind of the airline space. And it's interesting, a grand return as we start looking at, retail media expanding into this notion of commerce media for really any site that has lots of eyeballs and traffic and has constituent parts that would want to spend money to compete to get share on the volume on that site. As you move beyond, so you, as I look kind of through your history, right, you were at Stobart, right, an airline out of Dublin, but then move over to CityJet, right, in London for a few years. Similar type role, I would assume, right?
The same in DMI as well. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so very similar roles, but again, different challenges, because that they're all what I call distribution challenges as well as e-commerce piece, because airline distribution is quite sophisticated. And you're selling into corporate travel agents, you're selling into retail, agent travel agencies. You're also selling online as well. And it got me a real understanding of the power of distribution and thinking through fragmented distribution at a sort of really nth degree level, because you had to line them all up to get the numbers you needed. Whereas when I was in Stobart, it was just 100% online, and it was actually much easier. Yeah, when it's 100% online, life is easy because you control your own destiny. But when you've got multiple distribution points, you're all over it. By the way, as an aside, you talk about commerce media. One of the things I'm considering since the announcement of some of the big commerce media networks out of the US, like Connective for United Airlines and a few others as well, is a very similar thing to what I used to do in the airlines, but they call it ancillary revenue back in the day. So what used to happen is, and by the way, this is leading to another point in the career, which is between 2016 and 2021, former colleague asked me to be CMO of a company who provided the e-commerce technology to the airlines. And what they did around the world, all our clients were Chinese or Cathay Pacific in Hong Kong, or British Airways, or Iberia, or LATAM, whatever. And what we did was enable the airlines to do that whole upsell and cross-sell thing. Sell the seats, sell the bags, sell the holidays, sell the car hire, right through the thing. And we called it an attach rate to the seat. And it is literally not too far off, identical to how you think about retail media. And let me try and explain what I've just said there. So if you take, say, in an airline, and Elizabeth wants to go to Hawaii, yeah, and
Sure.
exactly. And particularly in winter, you want to go to Hawaii, and you initially what happens is you obsess about the seat. You go, what's the price I can get to go to Honolulu? And you see an ad for $300 one way, $500 return. And what happens is everybody in the world, in every single country in the world, obsesses about the cost of the airline, the flight. Yeah. And they go, hey, Nick, I got this. I got the flight for $300. Wow. Okay. And Nick goes, wow, what a deal. Tell me where that is. You never discuss the hotel. Yeah. You start with the flight. And everything then gets attached to the flight. So if we just take the flight only, then what happens then is, so the flight is what we called first wallet. Yeah. So we've got the seat and you go like, Nick, $500, amazing. Then the airline comes to you and says, listen, do you want to, do a premier seat at the front of the aircraft? You're like, yeah, man, I'm going on my holidays. What's that? $20? No problem. That's the cost of a cocktail in Honolulu. Bang. That $20 is at a 99% margin. Yeah. Then it's like, do you want the bag? Oh, well, I'm going to have to bring all the gear, blah, blah, blah. The bag's $50. That drops to the bottom line of the airline and they're making maybe 40 of the $50. Yeah. Then you're on board and you're like, do I want a cocktail? Of course I want a cocktail. And you're drinking the gin and tonics like there's no tomorrow. Each gin and tonic is like $20. They're earning $10 on the back of it. And then, maybe you've actually even said, I'll take a hotel for the first night, book it through the airline. Suddenly, that net profit that they got from the seat, which is typically, according to IATA rules, only about $6, they've made $70 from you. And it's still the same seat, because the attach rate varies between each one. Yeah. So if we take, say, retailing and retail media in particular, this is where my original passion for it came, about 6 years ago, was like, hold on a second, this whole retail media thing is identical to the airline business. This is exactly what we used to do. Yeah. And what it was like, if I come in with my, my jar of jam, what I need to do is sell you amongst these other things, but once I have you in the store, I can layer over these other things and get an attach rate associated with that jam. So in other words, I can attach a sponsored product to that. Maybe I can sell to the manufacturer a sponsored display, or maybe I can go and say, hey, you could lead with jams as part of your campaign and build an upper funnel campaign, blah, 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 that we all talk about. And so a lot of the things, to kind of boil all this down, a lot of the things that we're learning in retail media, we're actually quite similar to the airline business. And that's why I find it quite easy to talk about it.
We
It's
see
like
it.
moving up the funnel, right? Your attach rate
Yeah.
is like moving up the funnel.
We see it in so many areas just in our lives. You buy the seat at the stadium and your attach rate on $20 beers, is going to be pretty high for that organization.
Well,
Many other.
we can have a bit of fun on this one because there's a person who is somewhat well known in the US. I think you might have heard of him. His name is let me just remember here. Oh yeah, it's Elon Musk. Are you guys familiar with him by any chance?
Unfortunately, yes.
You have to rack your brains, Elizabeth. I saw that. No, he's so the reason why this is kind of funny. There's an airline based 12 kilometers from my front door, and they're called Ryanair. And Ryanair are definitely the largest low-cost carrier in the world with about 120 million passengers. So they are phenomenally big. They're literally just behind American and Lufthansa. And as recently as a couple of days ago, Elon Musk had a pop at them on social media saying he was going to buy them. So this is all very topical because they're the most profitable airline in the world. And their attach rate means that their net margin is 16%, whereas the average one for, say, American and United is about 6%. So the most profitable airline in the world is 10 kilometers away, and this is one Elon Musk is trying to buy.
Those low-cost airlines are really good at that. It's the price for the seat, the price for the bag, the price to board early, the price, and it's like, yeah, you got that £20 fare, €20 fare, but in the end you pay $100. That's not bad.
But if you're me now, you know how to because I'm an ex-airline guy. So when I fly, I'm flying to Frankfurt to do a keynote in a few weeks' time, and my flight's 40 euros for a 2-hour flight.
There you go.
Yeah.
So
I've flown to the Canaries for 4 hours for like $50, 50 euros.
it's such an amazingly different, it seems to me anyway, from the times I've spent in Europe, like a different flying economy there versus the like fewer bigger airlines in the US and that's many longer flights. You can't get anywhere for less than $200 here.
So I'm trying to explain to your listeners, like it's sort of like traveling in a bus in Latin America, but actually that's incorrect because traveling in a bus in Latin America is much nicer.
I'll have to take your word for it on that one. But
on a precipice on the side of a mountain going.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Our listeners obviously can't necessarily see me, but I'm not that tall, and I'm big for a Ryanair seat. Like I'm like squashed in.
High five.
That's kind of terrifying.
Pilot on the way out.
Yeah. Okay, so you're in this world of air travel and jets. You don't stay in it, do you? At some point, you're like, now what? I can sense it. You get the bug, right? There's always a bug.
Yeah. Well, would I like to go and stay in it? Yeah, I probably would have, but the world doesn't work like that. And there's this thing called COVID, which terminated everything to do with the travel industry, and which actually coincided with me doing a bunch of other things. And then what happened was I was just like, well, I know e-commerce very well. I know the technology very well. I know advertising really well. And I know how this whole ancillary revenue thing works in the airline business. And literally what I was doing, guys, was literally going, I'm going to write about this because I find it very interesting. In fact, what happened in 2019, I got asked to do a deep dive. One of my sort of side hustles was like, will you write a deep dive report on Amazon marketplaces? And I overdid it deliberately. I lost money on the report deliberately so I could really understand this one thing, because halfway through it, I was like, hold on, this Amazon advertising thing looks quite interesting. And, because I understand advertising and I understand attach rates and I understand all this sort of stuff and margins around that. And I was like, and I obviously understood Google search. I was like, this thing is really interesting. And that was it. Like, I just literally started telling people about it. And, you'd get the odd blank face going, what are you talking about? This Amazon thing doesn't matter. And then, of course, COVID hits and everybody's like, oh, I get it. And so that's where it really spawned from. It was like pure interest, following my interest.
Well, at least something good came out of COVID. Like, it's one of those things, right? I mean, to your point about the travel industry, like I was not expecting that, to be honest. Like your answer for like why you moved from the travel, but obviously that makes sense.
It's also quite a narrow business. Pragmatic career decisions are important for your listeners as well. And guess what? Retail, there's a lot of opportunity in retail. It's rapidly changing. It's taking on new technologies. It's got a lot of other interesting things happening. But there are 700 airlines in the world with over 1 million passengers. Really, about 50 of them matter, and they're spread all over the world, and they're quite difficult to work for. And they're a very low margin, challenging business. And also the other thing, and which is, again, I think for your listeners to think about, is, back in the day in 1961 and 62, there's a very famous Harvard paper by Ted Levitt called "What Business Are You In?" And it was like trying to explain to people that, don't be product focused, be customer focused, what the customer's pain point is, which is stuff that we all know now, but like back in the day, nobody really knew what that was about. And what business are you in? The airline business is in the business of moving people around. They're not in the customer business. They're in the operations business. And the retail business is in the logistics and buying game for years, whereas the airline business is in the transportation business. They're not in the travel business. So people think they're in the travel business. They're not in the travel business at all. So the people who can thrive, and so the people who have got a long-term career in the airline business, are more operations people. It's as simple as that. If you're marketing and retail people, not so much. So if you're being pragmatic about your career, you've got to go work and think about where the world is moving upwards, if you will. I mean, it's not like as though I had some sort of massive strategic decision-making process, but in general, digital commerce, retail media are on the upward trajectory. as are all the ancillary technologies around that and everything related to that. Whereas airlines are pretty much 1% and 2% growth, and they're operational ones. So from a career management perspective, you've got to think about the world slightly differently.
Huh. That makes a ton of sense. And when you think about like what business are you in, right? So like as a as part of your like digital marketing, do you still do digital marketing courses?
I do, yeah. It's a little less. I get asked to do them in person now, as in physically go into offices and do them. People still don't know stuff that I knew in 2007, so it's great. Long may that continue.
That's what I was wondering. Is like, you're able then from a content perspective? Essentially, it's just a refresh. It's like and it feels like that from an industry perspective today, like. With, of course, like there's a new announcement every week of like, Microsoft partnered with Amazon, and then like now there's like, AI agents for everything, and then they're threatening agentic commerce, and it makes you feel like you're gonna have to throw away the whole playbook. But really, to your point, you don't. Still the functional basics of the customer and where's the product in stock, and are you in the operations business, or not?
What business are you in? And then the other one is, what business are you in personally from a career perspective? And this is a thing I thought long and hard about over the years. And I did a course a couple of years ago, an entrepreneurial course called Strategic Coach. It was about 10 years ago. And they ask one very interesting question, which is, what's your unique ability? And I would probably say 20 years ago, Nick would have said playing the trumpet. Yeah, but actually, it's probably not playing the trumpet. It's like the ability to knuckle down and learn the skill of playing trumpet was actually what you learned, if you will. Yeah. And so if you look at my unique ability, it isn't actually working in the travel business. It isn't actually working in the airline business. It isn't even actually retail media. My core skill is actually pattern recognition.
Makes a ton of sense.
And I have supporting skills on that, which is a ability to write that really still comes as a surprise to me, that I can actually write because I was not known as a writer back in the day. And secondly, the ability to be sort of like communicate through language. And it turns out they are very important things in a world of abstraction. So like I was talking to somebody about this the other day. The world we have come from, if you will, is a world where, we can touch and feel things. Like I'm banging something here, and it's like quite a specific thing. I'm picking up this packet of chewing gum, and I can feel it, I can touch it, and I know what it is. And if I say chewing gum, you all have a model in your head of what chewing gum actually is. But if I say retail media, it's an abstraction. Digital commerce, it's an abstraction. It's a very high level thing. And it turns out a lot of people struggle with abstractions. They struggle to have language and understand it. We are kind of like getting a free lunch because we understand it. Yeah. And we understand abstractions. I can go and say, Elizabeth, I'm thinking about a sponsored product and we're going to do it in this thing. It's going to be offsite. It's going to be, and you're like, yeah, I got it. Yeah. But if we take, say, the majority of the world don't understand any of this stuff, we are trying to explain abstractions, and the world is getting more abstracted. What is AI? What is, ChatGPT? They're just abstractions and layers of abstractions and layers of abstractions. And so my core skill is pattern recognition and the ability to join the dots to people to make something less abstract and more real.
I would agree with that. Having read your stuff and heard you speak. Yes. Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
No, and most importantly, to kind of wrap up where, what I'm seeing as too present now on your LinkedIn profiles, right? Even the core constituent parts of something abstract like retail media need you to explain those abstractions to them. Your clients are the brands, retailers in the space over the last 5 years. Give us your drop on what Retail Media Works is and how you're advising with great.
Basically, it's I do three things, which is I work with brands to help them think through their retail media strategies, whether they're starting out or whether they're actually getting into the nitty gritty of working directly with the retailers and the individual strategy, they'll need retailer by retailer. I just advise them. I don't do the fingers and keyboard stuff. I wouldn't have a clue how to do that. But I draw on my marketing skills, marketing background, understanding of how marketing and advertising work to make that work. So people really like that. That's across the globe, Australia, New Zealand, here across Europe. The second thing to do is work with retail media networks to help them set up their retail sort of startup or scale up. So that's, again, Australia, New Zealand, Latin America, Germany, UK, Poland, Romania. And then the third thing I do is kind of like the little kind of personal flywheel is, because I know the two pieces of the work, I then write about it. And then because I have a skill in personal communication, as in presentation skills, I get asked to do keynotes. So this week I've done 3 keynotes alone, one for a very group and their kickoff, the other one for Riva Group in Germany, and the third one was for an investment bank who grilled me for 2 hours about how retail media could be revenue and margin accretive for retailers across the world, and how would that affect their share price.
Nothing big.
Yeah.
Just a little thing, right? But fun. It sounds like, I know we're just such nerds about this, but like it actually, to me, as you're describing, I was like, this actually sounds kind of fun.
It's
really
fun when you're doing the thing. It is fun when you, like, most people don't see the Colin crying into his laptop at 11 o'clock at night. So this is an actual story. This actually happened yesterday. I write a column for Internet Retailing, and I've decided over the last couple of months that I want to go back to my, if you will, long form. And part of the reason I want to do long form, which is like 2,000-3,000 words, because when I'm writing, I'm noodling about a particular topic. And as I write, as you guys know, you're writers as well. As you write, you're discovering the topic for yourself, which is why I always say to the audience, if you're listening today, write rather than get ChatGPT to do it, because you will understand the topic together. In fact, just as an aside, if you can create a virtual triangle in your head, or is it a Venn diagram? Can't remember which. Anyway, there's the writing, there's then teaching, and then there's the doing. And in fact, I got better in my career when I started teaching. Like, my career went exponential when I started teaching, because to teach, and I mean, it could be to a bunch of 5-year-olds, it doesn't matter, where you got to get an idea across. You become better at the task. So I encourage everybody, it doesn't matter whether it is to a bunch of 5-year-olds, to the local, whatever school, you got to teach the thing that you do, you'll become better. And then if you write about the thing that you do, you'll become even better. And then if you can talk and do what I like, kind of the stuff that I do, you become even better, because you're creating your own personal flywheel on it. But anyway, as recently as yesterday, I was like, what am I going to write about? And literally, it's like 12 o'clock, middle of the day. I got to deliver at 5. And there's a blank sheet. So nobody ever sees that, where I'm like, why did I decide to do this? What an idiot I am. I can't believe it. And there was the ideas churning in my mind. I'm a big fan of marketplaces. And I was like, what I'm going to do? What do people struggle with? Abstractions. What do they really struggle to understand? Marketplaces and retailers. Everybody kind of knows Amazon, but they don't really understand marketplaces. So I think I wrote the first 2,000 words on what really is a marketplace. What are the benefits for marketplaces for brands? What are the benefits for marketplaces for investors? What are the benefits for marketplaces for retailers? Now that you understand all that. Oh yeah, and the other thing about them was, I'd heard about this podcast about 5 years ago, and I remembered the words he used. And he said, marketplaces are internet scale. In other words, they can reach everybody and they can go massively scale. And I thought that is a great abstract idea to explain an abstraction. And so I remember that. I combine them all together. I've got the first half done. Second half is supposed to be done next week.
Oh, we actually had a discussion about that. Like, I'm on the IAB Commerce Council, and we were talking about, measurement standards and definitions. One of the first things we had to define essentially is what is commerce media. But I had to throw it out there as like, well, what is a marketplace? Like, because when I say marketplace, and I'm thinking about like Amazon or eBay or something like that, or third-party sellers, someone who works on like just even the Google side of our industry, like, defined it differently. And we're like, all right, I can't believe we have to have this discussion, but yes, we have to get down to that node of detail to make sure that we're all speaking the same language.
Well, the top tip for your audience is, and I've come around to this because, like, I'm like you guys. I'm kind of like, let me get straight into it. I don't want to mess around going, well, everybody, explain what retail media is. I'm like, buddy, I know this, yeah. But in fact, what I learned was that's the wrong frame. The message is always new to somebody. And because, as we said earlier on, we're dealing in a world of abstractions, we need to always start out with definitions and distinctions. And there's a little trick I use on this one. So imagine I'm talking to you guys, I'm talking to a bunch of experts like Nick and Elizabeth, and there's 100 of you in the room. I actually will go and say it like this. I'll say, listen, I know you're all experts, but I always think it's good to ground everybody in the basics, and then we kick off from there. Now, that particular little bit of rhetoric, what it does is those who haven't got a clue are then like visibly calmed, going, okay, well, I'm not going to look like a fool later on. And those who are in place can and understand it, can choose to either tune out or B, go, well, I think my definition's better. And so everyone's a winner when you start off with definitions and distinctions.
Well,
I would always
Colin,
encourage everyone to start a slide with Webster's defines as. I don't know. Whenever somebody puts one of those, I'm just like, I'm out. I'm out.
it's a very legal minded thing to do, to say, all right, let's start by defining what we're talking about here, and then we can get into it. Colin, I want to be respectful of your time, Elizabeth's time.
Yeah.
Go,
No,
sorry,
I just think it's good. Part of the reason is to say I changed my mind on this. And this is actually one of the other takeaways I would say is be ready to change your mind rather than be wedded to your particular thing, because I just saw the results and, it was like much better when I did the other thing rather than, okay, everybody's an expert, let's get into it.
You'll always lose someone on the on-ramp that way. In the race for retail media dominance, most brands are already behind. They're battling bloated tags, 30% data loss from ad blockers, and 50 millisecond windows to reach a shopper before they're gone. Enter MetaRouter. Led by the architect of Walmart's original ad business, MetaRouter is the first-mile infrastructure that replaces messy tracking pixels with a single, private, server-side stream. It's not just about routing data. It's about sub-second identity resolution that turns anonymous browsers into known buyers, all while keeping your first-party data locked inside your own cloud. Stop playing catch-up with yesterday's data. Own the first mile with MetaRouter.
Shop.
So in the last few minutes here, Colin, I would love to ask you kind of two kind of quick fire questions that we typically ask, which you've sort of given a ton of great advice to a more junior listener who's earlier in their career. But number one is, what is that piece of advice to that junior person in their career that's listening about how they can emulate what you've done? You've said so many great things, but I'd love you to distill an idea there. And then second, we often ask, what's your favorite conference, or maybe what's your least favorite conference? And we'd love to wrap kind of with those two.
Okay. Well, what was said 2,000 years ago at the Oracle at Delphi said, know yourself. That's quite difficult to do in your 20s. So one of the things you got to be able to do is work hard, get into it when you're 20s, turn up, do the right thing, say yes to everything so you can learn, and then realize that then there's a shift occurs in your 30s. But the parallel track, if you will, that's going on the whole time is to observe yourself. So what I call think about your thinking, and observe that, your opinions are not facts. Yeah. And there's one very important thing as well, which everybody's afraid to say, well, I'm going to say because I don't really care. One is, don't fall into this trap of like bringing your authentic self to work. We're here to work, not to actually run around the place and be a maniac. And you always have to do what your boss ideally wants, because your boss, typically, as I found from being a leader, has actually got different motivations because their boss is on their case as well. So a combination of things. Think about your thinking, work pretty hard, know what your boss wants, don't conflate your opinions with facts, and know your personal biases. Best favorite conference? Well, I'm going to say, obviously, the favorite conference is the one that I helped program, which is the Retail Media X conference, because I program it and I'm the MC at it. And it's clearly the world's greatest conference. I mean, what else would you expect me to say, Nick?
Is that's the one that's based in London?
It's based in London, yeah, and I think we're going to go international with it as well. Thinking about going to, well, it sounds like I'm like the kingpin behind it. No, I help program it and I chair the conference. I don't do the real hard work. I do the nice stuff at the front end.
Nice.
I've not been to that one, so I don't get I don't get to do as many international ones from like a retailing standpoint. So if a US based person, they should make the argument to go, it sounds like.
Yeah. Well, it's a pan-European thing, and we're getting, like, this year we got Germany, South Africa, Poland, France, UK, and obviously we're announcing the awards that night as well. And I wrote the awards, by the way. I wrote the full specs of the awards because of the different criteria, because not a lot of people know this, but my wife is the head of film in the BAFTAs, which is the equivalent of the Oscars. And so her gig is to write all the criteria for the awards. So we've got two people in the house who can write criteria for awards, and I did run them by her. So I know they're definitely amongst the best in class in the world.
But you proved something to me today, and that is that when you talked about your skill as the ability to communicate an abstraction in the advice that you gave to a younger person in their career read to me like you were communicating the abstraction of having the humility early on in your career to learn with discipline, show up every day, but that humility that's required to like not, to be aware of your thinking, to challenge it and not think that, whatever assumptions you held are the truisms that you have to live with. So I really liked that, and you proved it.
Thank you very much. In fact, if I was going to visualize it for your audience, there was a line in my career which went up, a good bit at the start, and then sort of like, if I will, give or take, flatlined it, stayed flat for a while, and then went upwards and to the right. And that was the sort of period where I just went and said, hey, think about your thinking. What if everything I know is wrong? What are my biases? And went from there. And it's stuck with me ever since.
Amazing. Well, Colin, thank you so much for joining us on Shopless today. I'm very excited to have you on board and to see you on the conference circuit.
Yeah, exactly. Delighted to be a guest. And I'm just so delighted that Nick didn't start playing trumpet, Elizabeth. I'm sure you're the same.
I mean, that's what I learned is that I need to bring you like a Pacific Northwest raspberry jam the next time I see you.
That sounds really nice. Yes, I prefer that rather than listen to Nick playing the trumpet. That's a really good one.
That's a deal.
That's a smart idea.
Thank you so much, Colin. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Colin.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Less. Shop. Less.